Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something that I think everyone can relate to on a visceral level.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's something that operates entirely in the background of our lives, right?
Right. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine a door, but like not a normal door, not your kitchen door or your front door. Imagine a very specific, totally unremarkable door sitting quietly in the corridor of your own mind.
And it's usually in a hallway you rarely walk down.
Exactly. And here's the crucial detail. This door isn't locked with a deadbolt. There's no heavy external padlock keeping it shut. It is closed by a subtle, almost invisible gesture. A gesture that you made a long time ago under unbearable emotional pressure. You closed it because what was on the other side was, well, simply too much to tolerate.
Yeah. And before we even begin to question what might be hidden behind that door, we have to examine the physical experience of just standing near it. Because the unconscious it's not floating in some abstract ethereal realm detached from your daily existence.
No, it's so physical.
It is. It lives right there in your tissue, in your nervous system. So when you simply imagine walking down that mental corridor, the reaction isn't usually a logical thought.
No, it's entirely physical. I've been doing a lot of introspection lately, trying to explore some of my own unresolved tensions. And when I mentally approach those difficult areas, I feel it way before I think it.
Yes. What does that feel like for you?
There's this sudden tightness in the chest, a constriction in the throat. The pulse accelerates just a fraction. It's this visceral alertness, like a somatic whisper that something dangerous is nearby.
I love that phrase, somatic whisper. That is the first language of inner resistance. It is what early psychoanalysts sometimes refer to as actual neurosis, the idea that unresolved psychological tension translates directly into physiological symptoms.
So the body is taking the hit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Long before the conscious manager of your mind, let's just call it the ego, steps in to rationalize the situation, your body is already speaking the truth. The ego's job is essentially to act as the PR department of your psyche.
Right, doing damage control.
Maintaining order, keeping you functioning in polite society. It will quickly generate excuses like, oh, it's better not to go there, or I just don't have time to dwell on the past. But underneath that smooth PR spin, your body is bearing the sheer weight of the exact thing your conscious mind refuses to represent.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because framing resistance as a physical, physiological state really challenges how I usually think about it. I've always viewed resistance as a purely mental exercise.
How so?
Like a cognitive choice. For example, I have a super stressful email sitting in my inbox, and I am actively choosing to click over to a different tab instead of dealing with it.
Right, that's conscious avoidance.
But you're describing a scenario where the resistance is literally embedded in the body. It feels like the body's a smoke detector going off, blaring this loud, undeniable alarm, but the conscious mind keeps trying to pull the batteries out rather than actually looking for the fire.
The smoke detector analogy illustrates the mechanics of the psyche perfectly. Pulling the batteries out is the ego's desperate attempt to maintain a sense of equilibrium. It introduces a fundamental conflict that governs human behavior.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, on one side, there is a magnetic, almost gravitational pull toward that closed door. The truth, by its very nature, demands to be known and integrated. But on the other side, an invisible, equally powerful counterforce is holding you back.
Terrified of what that integration might cost.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You have two massive currents moving in total opposition. That tight throat or that sudden, inexplicable fatigue you feel isn't random. It is the physical friction generated by those two opposing currents crashing into each other.
Wow. And silencing that alarm, fighting that magnetic pull day in and day out, that cannot be a passive state.
It is anything but passive.
If the body is fighting so incredibly hard to signal us that something vital is behind the door, the mind must be working overtime to silence it. I mean, it must require an absolutely exhausting amount of energy.
It requires a staggering, continuous expenditure of energy. And this brings us to a foundational mechanism of our inner architecture, which is repression.
Right. And repression isn't just forgetting, is it?
No, we really need to distinguish repression from normal forgetting. Forgetting is a passive fading of material. You forget where you left your keys, right? The memory was conscious, and it simply degraded over time because it wasn't emotionally charged.
It just faded away.
Exactly. Repression, on the other hand, is a radical, active diversion at the border of your consciousness. The material is never allowed to enter the conscious mind at all. It is forcefully exiled into the unconscious and kept there by constant guard.
So it's an active process happening in real time. It's not something I did once when I was 7 years old. It's something my mind is doing right this second.
Every single second. Which forces us to look at the economy of psychic energy. There's a common cultural assumption that ignorance is a state of peace. We always say ignorance is bliss.
Right, but it's not.
Psychological ignorance is not peaceful at all. It is a highly demanding, energy-consuming project. You are constantly maintaining psychic dams against a massive, relentless flood of submerged memories, fears, and desires.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The life force, the vital energy or libido that you could be using for creativity, for genuine connection, for joy, is being actively diverted to reinforce that dam.
So what does this all mean for our daily lives? To me, it means ignorance isn't like leaving a dusty box up in the attic where it just sits there harmlessly.
No, not at all.
It's like trying to hold a giant, fully inflated beach ball underwater with one hand while trying to drink your coffee and have a normal, pleasant conversation with your partner with the other hand.
Yes, that is a brilliant way to put it.
No wonder people mistake sheer exhaustion for their natural temperament. They think, oh, I'm just a low-energy person. I need more sleep. No, you're just holding a massive beach ball underwater.
And eventually, that struggle breaks down. You cannot hold a highly pressurized object underwater indefinitely. The repressed material is not dormant. It is active and constantly pushing upward, seeking expression.
Because it wants to be known.
Exactly. But because the ego is fighting equally hard to push it down, the two forces eventually reach a treaty. We call this a compromise formation.
A compromise formation. So what does that look like?
Well, because the repressed material cannot enter conscious awareness directly without causing overwhelming anxiety, it disguises itself. It leaks out. It manifests as physical symptoms, recurring dreams, or repetitive behaviors.
Ah, so the symptom isn't just a random glitch.
Not at all. The symptom you experience is quite literally a negotiated settlement between the repressed impulse trying to get out and the defending ego trying to keep it hidden.
Okay, so like someone who compulsively washes their hands until the skin literally cracks and bleeds. On the surface, if you just observe them, it looks like an extreme obsession with hygiene or a fear of germs. But based on the mechanics of a compromise formation, they aren't just trying to be clean.
Far from it. They are expending vital, precious life energy to physically neutralize an unconscious sense of contamination. Perhaps there is a deeply buried guilt or an unacceptable desire that makes them feel morally dirty.
And the ego can't handle that.
The ego absolutely cannot allow that thought into awareness. So the psychic energy is displaced onto a physical act. The physical act of washing is the compromise.
It temporarily binds the anxiety.
Exactly. It binds the internal anxiety, providing a momentary sense of relief, but at a terrible compounding cost to their daily functioning.
This brings up a terrifying thought for me.
What's that?
If keeping this door closed is so utterly exhausting and it depletes our life force and it forces us into these bizarre compromises just to function what could possibly be so horrifying behind the door.
That is the big question.
I mean, why is paying this massive tax of exhaustion preferable to just opening it?
That touches on perhaps the most unsettling insight of early psychoanalytic observation. When we think of repressed material, our modern sensibilities immediately go to trauma, pain, or deep shame.
Right, which makes sense.
And certainly, the psyche represses those experiences to survive. But trauma is not the whole story. The most terrifying thing we repress, the material that requires the thickest walls, is often raw desire.
Wait, desire? Like what we actually want. Why would we run from that?
Because unsocialized desire is incredibly dangerous to a dependent child. We are talking about forbidden wishes, deeply aggressive impulses toward the very people we rely on for survival.
Oh, wow.
Sexual longings or aggressive rivalries that completely violate the moral codes we are taught to internalize. Consider the classic Oedipal dynamic in early childhood development.
Okay.
A child doesn't merely fear the discipline of the father. The child in their raw, unfiltered unconscious might wish for the father's absolute disappearance so they can possess the mother's love and attention exclusively.
That is intense. To a child, wishing someone away is practically the same as destroying them.
It is a raw, deeply aggressive wish. But that same child is entirely dependent on that father for survival, for protection, and for love.
Right, they need him.
Exactly. The wish to destroy the caretaker is fundamentally incompatible with the reality of needing them. The anxiety produced by that contradiction is intolerable. Therefore, the desire must be banished behind the door.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we repress these impulses out of a desperate need to survive and preserve the love of our caretakers, then keeping the door closed isn't about cowardice at all.
No, it's not.
It's actually a tragic form of devotion. It's a loyalty oath we swore as small children to protect our image of our parents because we needed them to be perfect, flawless protectors in order to feel safe enough to survive in a massive, overwhelming world.
That framing gets to the very heart of the primal fantasy. It is the crucial moment the developing psyche trades authenticity for security. Let's look at a common mechanism used to achieve this, known as splitting.
Splitting, how does that work?
Imagine an infant interacting with their mother. From the infant's perspective, the mother is a godlike figure. She's the source of all life, food, warmth, and regulation. But human mothers are imperfect beings.
Of course.
Sometimes that mother is exhausted, distracted, frustrated, or subtly withholds warmth.
Because she's a human being trying to raise a baby, which is inherently frustrating.
Right. But an infant has no concept of object permanence, nor the cognitive capacity to understand nuance. A baby cannot comprehend that the person who magically provides life is the exact same person who deprives them of comfort.
It's too much of a contradiction.
To know that to hold both the loving, providing mother and the withholding, dangerous mother in the mind simultaneously would completely shatter the child's fragile sense of safety.
It would be terrifying.
The cognitive dissonance is lethal to their emotional survival. So the psyche splits the image in two. The loving, perfect mother is kept in the conscious mind. The withholding, dangerous mother is banished underground, placed firmly behind the door.
Oh, wow. So we literally fracture our own reality to protect our attachments.
Exactly.
To uncover the truth behind that door as an adult would mean looking back at the people we loved most and seeing their profound limitations and failures. And even harder, it would mean looking at ourselves and acknowledging the terrifying freedom of our own raw, unsocialized desires.
To know the truth is to realize we harbor impulses that completely contradict our carefully curated conscious self-image. It requires facing the fact that we have harbored aggressive, even destructive wishes toward those we love.
That is an immensely heavy burden to bear.
It is, which explains why the architecture of our psychological defenses is built so thick.
Let's talk about that architecture. Because if our foundational blueprint for love and safety is built on a lie, on a split image that has to completely warp how we interact with people today, these fractured pieces are still operating from behind the scenes.
They are entirely dictating the script. The ego builds an intricate fortress to keep the door closed. We utilize watchtowers of denial, we dig deep moats of rationalization, we build thick walls of projection where we assign our own unacceptable traits onto others.
Right.
But the tragedy of this architecture is that what once saved us when we were fragile children now actively imprisons us as capable adults.
I notice this in myself sometimes, honestly. I will react to a slight shift in my partner's tone of voice as if it's a massive existential betrayal. It feels completely disproportionate to what's actually happening in the room.
What you were describing is one of the most profound manifestations of this internal architecture, which is transference.
Transferring.
Yes. Transference is essentially using an outdated map of your childhood hometown to try and navigate a brand new city. You are relating to your romantic partner or your boss or your best friend, not as the human being standing in front of you, but as a transparent overlay of a figure from your past.
So I'm projecting the repressed, split-off figures from my childhood onto the blank screen of the people in my present.
Precisely.
But why? I mean, why does the mind want to recreate that old dynamic?
The psyche does this because it is desperately trying to complete unfinished business. It wants to master the original trauma or heal the original wound by reenacting it. But there is a cruel irony here.
What's the irony?
The psyche almost always chooses homeostasis over true healing. It chooses the familiar. The known pain of being misunderstood or rejected by a partner feels fundamentally safer, more predictable than the terrifying unknown risk of being reliably, consistently loved and seen for who you truly are.
Because being reliably loved contradicts the primal fantasy.
Exactly.
If I accept that my partner truly loves me, it threatens the entire architecture of the defense I built to survive my childhood. So we unconsciously sabotage our present to prove our childhood defenses were right all along.
And this leakage from behind the door happens in incredibly specific ways through the primary processes of the unconscious mind. Two of the main mechanisms the unconscious uses to disguise its messages are displacement and condensation.
Okay, let's slow down and break those mechanisms apart. Start with displacement. How does shifting an emotion from one thing to another actually work in real life?
Consider someone who experiences a massive panic attack in the middle of a crowded grocery store. Consciously, they might think they have developed agoraphobia or a fear of crowds.
Right, that would be the logical assumption.
But the panic attack is not about the grocery store. The sensory details of the store, the harsh fluorescent lights, the overwhelming volume of choices, the physical press of the crowd, the inability to find an exit easily. These act as somatic triggers. They reactivate an ancient, displaced childhood terror.
What kind of terror?
Perhaps the terror of the exact moment the child realized their parent was fallible and could not actually protect them from the overwhelming dangers of the world.
So they displace that feeling.
Yes, the intense emotion, the sheer helplessness, is shifted from the unbearable original object, the helpless failing parent, onto a trivial, manageable object, the grocery store aisle.
Manageable because you can just leave the store.
Exactly. The ego does this because you can choose to avoid a grocery store aisle. You cannot choose to avoid your dependence on your parent when you are 4 years old. Displacement creates an illusion of control.
That makes so much sense. It shifts the threat to something we can walk away from. Now, what about condensation? When I hear that word, I think of water droplets on a glass. How does it work in the psyche?
Think of condensation like a Sokic zip file or a police composite sketch, where the features of 5 different suspects are blended into a single face.
Okay, a zip file? I like that.
The unconscious has multiple fears, desires, and memories that it needs to express, but the ego won't let them through individually. So the unconscious condenses them into a single, highly dense symbol or narrative, most commonly in dreams.
Can you give me an example of how that zip file looks when it's opened?
There's a classic example from the early days of psychoanalysis. It's often referred to as the dream of Irma's injection.
I think I've heard of that.
On the surface, the dream narrative is simple. A doctor is examining a patient named Irma and watches a colleague give her an injection with an unclean syringe. If you just look at the surface, it's a medical dream.
Right.
But when you analyze it, that single image of the injection is a masterclass in condensation. Packed tightly into that one scene is the dreamer's deep professional rivalry with his colleagues, his profound guilt over an actual medical mistake he had made, his anxiety about his own bodily health, and repressed sexual desires.
All in one image.
All in one image. The unconscious mashed all of those unbearable pressures into one bizarre, disguised scenario so it could slip past the guards at the door without waking him up.
So wait, if symptoms like the grocery store panic attack or the compulsive hand washing or these bizarre dense dreams are just displacements and compromises,
Yes.
does that mean the symptom isn't actually our enemy? We spend so much time trying to eradicate our symptoms, taking medication to suppress them, reading self-help books to defeat them. Is the symptom actually a secret language trying to negotiate a cure for us?
That is a profound shift in perspective, and a highly accurate one. The symptom contains its own key. It is not an enemy to be eradicated. It is a somatic prayer for safety.
The somatic prayer.
Yes, it is the psyche's best attempt at healing under impossible constraints. Think of a woman who compulsively checks the locks on her doors 10 times every night before she can sleep.
Okay.
If she engages in the painful work of introspection, she might realize that this exhausting ritual began the very year her father unexpectedly abandoned the family.
Oh, wow. She sees that the lock checking isn't madness. It's her body trying to physically secure a world that felt fundamentally emotionally insecure. It's a literal attempt to lock the door her father walked out of.
Yes. And when she recognizes the true meaning of the symptom, when her conscious mind finally witnesses what the body is actually trying to achieve, a profound shift occurs.
Because the secret is out.
Exactly. The massive amount of psychic energy bound up in that checking ritual begins to naturally loosen. The repetition is no longer necessary because the underlying message has finally been received.
The smoke detector can finally turn off because someone finally smelled the smoke and acknowledged the fire.
The conflict is brought into the light of consciousness, where the adult ego can process it, rather than leaving the terrified child to manage it in the dark.
We have covered so much ground here. We've mapped out this massive, exhausting architecture of defense. We've felt the weight of our own physical resistance, that somatic whisper, and we've decoded the secret language of our symptoms. So let's bring you, the listener, back to the hallway in your mind. You are standing right back at the threshold of that unremarkable, closed door.
Right.
After everything we've uncovered, what do we do now? My instinct, and I think the instinct of anyone who likes to fix their problems, is to say, okay, I see the door, I know what it is, I'm gonna kick it down, I'm gonna violently force myself to confront every buried desire, every split image, and every trauma right now and get it over with.
And that aggressive approach is exactly what you must avoid. Violently kicking the door down will only flood the fragile ego with more highly charged material than it can possibly process.
Which would just make things worse, I imagine.
Much worse. The result of that flooding is often psychological collapse or re-traumatization. The true work of an authentic life is to honor the resistance.
Honor it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That resistance, that thick door, exists for a profoundly valid reason. It kept you alive. It kept your world intact when you were entirely too small to hold the heartbreaking contradictions of human love. Healing is not an act of destruction.
What is it then?
It is a process of metabolizing the original purpose of the defense, thanking it for its vital service so that it can eventually gently be retired.
It's not a war against ourselves. It's a compassionate negotiation with our own history.
Beautifully said.
That completely changes how I view my own anxieties. So I want to leave you in a final thought to carry with you long after this deep dive ends. You are standing in the hallway. You feel the tightness in your chest. The door is right there in front of you. We've spent this entire time talking about the individual psyche, your door, my door. But consider the mechanics we just explored. The exhausting suppression of truth, the massive diversion of energy, the bizarre symptoms that leak out. What happens when an entire culture or a whole society collectively agrees to keep a door closed?
That is a staggering thought.
What historical truths, what collective desires or primal fears are we holding underwater together? And if the symptoms of a repressed individual look like panic attacks and compulsive rituals, what do the symptoms of a repressed society look like? You don't have to answer that today. Just pay attention to the architecture around you.